Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. Thanks for joining promptly. We're going to wait a couple more minutes for other attendees to join us and we will begin soon. So bear with us, grab a tea or coffee and we'll start shortly. Hello everyone, welcome to the next installment of the Gogler e-waste toolkit. This is module 3, looking at the financials of e-waste management. So we're going to be exploring some of the costs for different products and activities, looking at some of the ways that these costs can be structured according to the different models of e-waste management, and then exploring some company perspectives around the market prices they see, and some of the activities that we as an industry may be doing to help manage those costs, thinking from their operations and trying to pin down this thorny topic with some numbers and some practice. Cool. So before I get into the agenda, let me introduce myself. My name's Drew Corbin, the Program Manager for Consumer Protection and Technology at Gogler. We have an exciting agenda today. We're going to have a short introduction before going into an expert interview with Federico Magalini, and that will be moderated by Athena Kyriakopoulou, the lead consultant working on this e-waste toolkit. And then we're going to move to a discussion with Phoenix and Zola to explore some of these themes. And there will be opportunity for questions and answers throughout. If you have any questions, please, you can type them in the question box, or I think you can raise a virtual hand and we will try and spot that and invite you to chime in. These slides will be shared afterwards. There's not many slides, but there's some interesting ones which we will send around afterwards. The webinar is being recorded and will sit on the Google eWaste Hub. All of the attendees are muted, so if you do want to speak up, then you raise your hand and then we can unmute you for you to say a few words. Cool. Before we get into the content, I was hoping to introduce Grayson Martili as the new eWaste Working Group co-chair, but Grayson isn't actually online yet, so maybe we can hear from him a bit later. But yeah, suffice to say, Grayson is the new co-chair. He's taken over from Peter Kosakowski, who's moved to the water sector in. If anybody's interested, thanks to Peter for his support, and we're very much looking forward to working with Grayson. Otherwise, I'm pleased to pass over to Athena Kyriakopoulou to take us through this first section of the seminar. Athena.
Great, thank you very much, Drew. I'm just going to turn on my webcam here and invite Federico to turn on his as well. As Drew mentioned, I've been supporting Gogla in the creation of this e-waste toolkit. I have worked in the off-grid energy sector in East Africa across the region, and most recently I was working on solar e-waste issues as well. So to kick off, Federico, you need no introduction in the world of e-waste, but if you might go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, we'll start off from there.
Okay, no, my name is Federico. I'm currently heading the UK branch of Sophis, which is a consulting company, and we have been quite active on e-waste management over the last years. Me personally, I've been involved in this for almost 20 years now. Doing research, consulting for the Commission for some big multinationals, but also for almost 4 years I was operation managing a take-back scheme, so I was involved in the startup of the system in Italy for e-waste, portable battery, lead-acid battery, so I've kind of hands-on experience. I struggled myself in setting up the system at national level, and believe me, when I talk about lead-acid batteries in south of Italy, it's not much difference compared to developing countries in terms of what's going on in certain dynamics. So yeah, I'm happy to be here today, and let's try to help as much as possible companies here to get some insight. So happy to answer any kind of question you will put in front of me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Federico. Most recently, you've been supporting the off-grid sector in a lot of different ways when it comes to e-waste, and one in particular is a piece of research that you've done around the cost of e-waste. I think we have a slide coming up that shows some of the numbers that you were able to aggregate in Kenya. Can you tell us a little bit about this research, the methodology behind it, how you got this, and what it tells us?
Yeah, we did a couple of studies for DFID. I think the first one was back in 2016, and then it was more general, and we used at that time Nigeria, Rwanda, and Kenya as a case study, and then we did a couple of follow-up, one in Kenya and one in Rwanda, and this number, this slide is coming, I think, from the second study, but the approach was always the same. We tried to quantify the cost for proper management of e-waste, including off-grid solar, using an activity-based model, meaning that we split the entire chain from access to waste, collection, transportation, and treatment cost. We try to quantify the cost for the different steps, and then when it comes to the treatment, we have, of course, the value, intrinsic economic value of the metals, of the materials. You have some cost, and then you have the net treatment cost, which is the difference of the two. And we sum up the costs, and we added up with these kind of numbers. Now, what these numbers are telling us, and this is just an insight into the off-grid solar sector, and not looking at other, let's say, appliances or connected device or solar home system, is that first of all, products are different even when we look only at off-grid solar sector, because we have solar portable lighting and solar home system, like the two different, let's say, example of products. And of course, the value for when we look at the recycling cost, the value intrinsically connected in a solar home system is radically different from a value connected intrinsically included in a solar home system. We have a huge difference if a product is using a lead-acid battery compared to a lithium battery. Within the lithium family, we know that some of the Gogla members of the companies are using lithium phosphate batteries, some others are using lithium ion battery, and here when it comes to recycling, the main driver, cost driver in recycling of lithium is the presence or not of cobalt. So if you have a lithium ion battery with cobalt inside, a recycler might be in the position to pay you, like it's happening for a lead acid battery. If you have a lithium phosphate battery, you have no cobalt inside, and then the recycling cost is basically negative, and you have to pay a lot of money. So this is something you need to keep in mind. Products are different, and so there are different implications when it comes to the cost. But then if you look at the very first bar, solar lantern, you have a very huge cost implication for the so-called first mile collection, when you have to bring a product from a very rural area up to a place where you can have more consolidation. Even if it's maybe $1.5, $2, you have $1 or $2 to spend over a product that is 200 grams of weight. So the incidence of that cost in euro or dollar per ton is very high. So the bottom line is that for some products you might have very high cost. For some other you might have a potential mitigation effect caused by lead acid battery if present, and long cable containing copper if present. So that's, I would say, the bottom line.
Yeah, to give our audience here an idea of just how important that intrinsic value of the product is up on the cost, can you give us indicative prices for a lead acid battery versus a lithium iron phosphate battery?
Yeah, I mean, right now, when it comes to lithium battery, it's a big topic worldwide. Not only connected with off-grid solar sector. At the moment, there are only very few, let's say, recyclers really worldwide really doing lithium battery recycling. That's the future waste streams. The biggest one is definitely Umicore in Belgium. They currently have capacity of 40,000 tons, and they are planning to upscale. There are a few other companies. And those companies are really charging a price depending on the composition of battery. If you're talking about lithium phosphate battery, we're talking about 3,500 euro per ton, or US dollars per ton. Yeah, that you have to pay. You have to pay. If you're talking about lithium ion battery, you can easily get 600, 700, even 1,000 euro per ton, depending on the value of cobalt. And then nickel metal hydride is something similar connected to the value of nickel. So if we look at lithium under the word lithium battery, of course you can go from getting up to $1,000 or having to pay a couple of $1,000. So yeah, the price gap is very different, and is only, as I said, the main driver is the presence of cobalt. When it comes to the lithium, the lead acid battery, the majority of the smelters pay a share of LME price. I would say up to 30-40% of LME price is something still fair to receive, meaning that you might get. Yeah.
Sorry, what LME is for?
Yeah, the London Metal Exchange. So it's the reference price for the lead. So if you assume, let's say, 2,000 euro or dollars per ton for lead, you can get let's say up to 600-700 euro per ton or dollar per ton of battery delivered to the. So again, in the case of lead acid battery, it's a net profit, while in the case of let's say a lithium battery can be a profit or can be a big expense.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. These differences in off-grid solar products, the prices between them, how do these prices compare, or sorry, these costs, how do they compare with other e-waste fractions, other e-waste products?
Yeah, the point when you use the word e-waste or electronic waste, use one word, and behind one word we have 100 of type of products, and those 100 of type of products are collected and treated in streams, waste streams, and you group product depending on the technology needed for the treatment. And usually we have 5 main stream. You have the so-called cooling and freezing, where you have fridges and air conditioners. You have large appliances, you have the small appliances, you have the screens, and then you have the lamps. This is historically how products are collected, not because we want to collect that way, but because recyclers recycle in those kind of groups. And of course, products are different. And what the main difference is that the composition of the product, how easy it is to access the metals and the valuable fraction. All in all, it's all about dismantling a product manually or mechanically and get your hands on the fraction. Some fractions are having positive value, like metals, some plastics. Some others are having not positive value. It's a cost to proper dispose or even to proper recycle. And here you need to do the balance. For some products it's positive, some products is negative. Now, when I look at the off-grid solar sector and we look at the solar portable lighting, solar lantern, it's really, really expensive because of these lithium phosphate batteries that are usually not that used in other sector, in other electronic products. They are using few products like.
Oh, sorry, I think on the next slide here we have those actual numbers that you're talking about.
Yeah, here we just had some consolidated numbers. The point, as I said, is that for some products, the cost, the net cost is lower. If we talk about large appliances, mainly metals, so that is basically value. For some other products like monitor or fridges or lamps, it's a cost, and it's maybe medium or high cost. Definitely lamps, energy saving lamps containing mercury are those having the higher recycling cost. And then of course you have these off-grid solar products where you might, especially for solar lanterns, the incidence of the lithium phosphate battery is high because the product is basically small, is light, and the great majority of the product weight is the battery itself. So that's what is penalizing a little bit solar lantern compared to others. But that's how it is. That's how products is done. Before off-grid solar sector, we had the energy-saving lamps, mercury-containing lamps, and the lamps was small, was light, and proper recycling was very, very, very costly. 700-800 euro per ton for lamps.
We have a question on what you were previously speaking about on the dependencies that lithium batteries have, their cost. The question is from Nick Sparks. He asks, why does the recovery of the lithium metal have zero value? Why is it dependent on nickel and cobalt? Why doesn't lithium have a value there?
This is mostly connected to the market dynamics. I mean, first of all, even if we call them lithium batteries, lithium is just one of the elements, and the chemical composition is varying a lot depending on the anode and the cathode material. Lithium as such is not the scarce metal, is not having such a high value. We have enough lithium right now to let's say to cope with the demand for till 2050, according to some estimation. Might be it will be reduced depending on how will boost now the electric mobility, but what is really having a high value is cobalt. So of course, when you run a plant to recover these cobalt, so to process, for instance, lithium battery, you have very high cost, capital cost and running cost, and then you need to you have a balance. So it's not necessary that the lithium is the driver for recyclers. It's cobalt is much more interesting because of this value. Of course, you can. I just want also to make this clear. In Europe, we have a mandatory requirement to recycle batteries because we have a law for that. Before that, we were disposing proper landfilling for a lot of batteries. Right now, if you don't have a legal obligation to recycle batteries, in many countries, proper landfilling is a much cheaper option than recycling, in this case, lithium phosphate battery. But of course, then we have a societal question or issue to keep resources in the loop, because the moment we dispose something, that's the moment that we kind of give up for a certain period the idea of accessing certain materials for recovery. So that's the trade-off. But honestly, right now in Africa, it will be cheaper. It will definitely be cheaper, proper disposal, landfilling compared to recycling of lithium phosphate battery.
The key word there is proper landfilling, a managed sanitary landfill.
Absolutely. Yes.
So there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of tools that exist on the cost of e-waste, and there's a growing body of knowledge on the cost of solar e-waste. What would you recommend as the first steps that an off-grid solar company should take to make this information useful for them and effective? How can they use it to their benefit?
Well, first of all, I think we have to consider a lot of solar companies. Historically, has been proactive, trying to do collection and recycling in different countries. In the majority of African countries, we don't have a very well developed collection and recycling infrastructure, so it's always a matter of finding the right guy to work with. And I think we have in some countries, we have these companies. So first question is just first suggestion or recommendation, just try to discuss, engage them to really get your hands on the real cost. We did make all this calculation working with some of the African recyclers, but when it comes to a specific contract you might do as a company, it will be highly influenced by your own product, your product portfolio, whether your products are having lead acid battery or lithium batteries, whether your products are easy to dismantle compared to others. So you can really have better insights, better ideas. So I always recommend trials. And secondly, when it comes to recycling, it's all about volumes. One of the key elements to drive costs down is to ensure to recyclers continuity in the supply of material to ensure volumes. That's why if you work together with some of your competitors, you might be able maybe again to reduce your cost, because recyclers might optimize the logistic, the collection. So it's not charging you $200 for going and collecting, let's say, 2 boxes of your products, and he's collecting 2 boxes of your products and 1 box of another and 1 box from another one. And then the cost of the truck for 1 day is always 200, and then you split these 200, 150, and 50. That's how you do kind of groupage, and now you can optimize your collection cost.
That first step that you mentioned about doing your due diligence, going through a procurement process, there's been some discussion around the idea of cost benchmarking. Do you think cost benchmarking for e-waste providers is feasible for the African off-grid sector at the moment? If not, why not?
I would say it's cost benchmarking is something companies are doing in Europe, where we have a legal obligation of collection recycling since 2005, 2004. Now we have 15 down the line. Over the last 10 years, company really started doing benchmarking between recyclers. If they are using service provider, benchmarking between service provider. I mean, that's the way you drive costs down, ensuring there's a fair competition between service providers, recyclers. I think right now in Africa, it's a little bit too early, because we don't have that many service providers, or we don't have that many service providers that are good enough, that are able to recycle products in a proper way. And this is the point. We know in Kenya we only have few licensed by NEMA. In other countries we might have few more. In other countries we have less. Still you have those and hundreds sometimes of players that will be more than willing to get their hands on your product, because there is value, there is economic value in the e-waste recycling. That's why people are doing e-waste recycling. There are metals, for the majority of base metal, copper, aluminium, iron. You have local market. It's no secret. Lead acid battery, everyone is aware that lead as a value. You can just break the battery, forget about the acid, forget about the plastic, just go and sell the lead. The problem is not the exploitation of the economic value. The problem is the proper exploitation of the economic value. And that word, the proper, is not making a difference in the cost structure of companies. So you start doing economic benchmarking the moment you have at least 3 or 4 companies that can do proper exploitation of the economic value.
So at the moment, it's really companies who should do internal tender processes, but kind of an industry cost benchmarking, it's not quite there yet. We need more proper recyclers.
I think so. What you can do right now is definitely identify the right guys to work with, maybe help them to grow, set your requirements, how you want your products to be treated, understand the cost implication of this proper treatment, and then work with them towards cost reduction. We have seen in Europe, just to give you some examples, some numbers. The first year I was working as operation manager, we had a contract with Recycle for proper recycling of refrigerator was on average 250 euro per ton. And then the cost went down. Nowadays, the costs are around, I would say 65 euro per ton. And this is because, of course, fluctuation of raw material value, but also because company invested in better technology, optimize more volume, more continuity, and you go down. And you can work with recyclers, even if they are a supplier, helping them to reduce their cost. The same way you do this with the suppliers on procurement when you manufacture your products.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good point. And to promote the presence of more proper recyclers, regulation is a big part of that. And in a lot of off-grid solar markets at the moment, we're seeing regulation come through. I don't know if it's the next slide, but we have an excerpt here from the draft Kenyan regulation that speaks of calculating compliance costs through two different methods. There's a market share calculation and an obligation calculation. I think it's the next slide. Yep.
Yeah, I think,
my question on this is, can you talk a little bit about these methods? Are they common amongst EPR schemes, and how will this affect the prices, the costs?
In 95, if not 99% of cases of countries around the world, e-waste legislation is based on the concept of extended producer responsibility. This means that the financial, in first place, and in most of the cases, also operational responsibility lies with producers. So with the company that are importing, producing, manufacturing the products on the market. And of course, in some countries like Ghana or China, or you producers simply are requested to pay, and then they have no financial control, operational control, and not even financial control, because the fees are defined by someone else. In the great majority of cases, producers are requested to pay, but they are also free to organize themselves. And that's when they say, they decide to work together. They decide to create a dedicated entity, compliance schemes, or producer responsibility organization, and say, okay, what's the best way to let's say, to share the cost? Is basically depending on the market share. The companies that are having higher shares are responsible for higher shares of waste, and that's how it's basically let's say calculated and assessed. Now, the big difference, one of the big differences, is that whether you say, okay, we are just deciding what's the actual cost for recycling our product in a given year, and then we just multiply this cost times the sales we are doing. Okay, if the proper recycling of a lamp is 10 and I'm selling 20 lamps, I pay 20 times 10, 200. And the other, let's say, option is that you simply say, okay, we simply look at what's the actual cost that we are have to pay this year, and it will, of course, depends on how many products are being collected and properly recycled, and then we simply decide to share those costs among those of us that are present on the market. So you basically you pay the actual cost still on the basis of our market share, because at the end, whatever the mechanism, the more you sell, in both cases, the more you sell, the more you will pay. multiplied per unit, and if it's just based on the return stream, you again are dividing the cost depending on your market share. And again, you measure your market share on the basis of the sales. Might be sales by unit, might be sales by weight. That's a kind of a metric that can may change a little bit things, but ultimately, the bigger you are on the market, the more responsibility you will take.
In an industry like off-grid solar, where access to waste is particularly challenging, most of the products sold are in rural areas rather than urban areas. Which method? How can companies navigate this responsibility in light of the fact that they have higher costs of getting access to their waste than, let's say, a cell phone company or laptop company?
Yeah, here I think there's something that is intrinsically connected with your industry. And for those of you that were participating in some of the previous webinar or involved in this activity, Google and CDC are let's say pushing on the current draft bill in Kenya. It's something that we already started discussing. You have an intrinsic disadvantage that you're selling your products to customers that are really based in rural area, off-grid, really. And of course, this will it's automatically implying that your collection cost will be higher, simply because you don't have waste collection infrastructure in rural areas. You don't have a lot of collection points where waste can be consolidated, and then transport can be optimized. And this is, of course, the implication of being off grid, of working with rural communities, and that's something you cannot change. The only thing that for me it could make sense to push is just to kind of offer a balance or trade-off to local governments, saying that the money, part of the money the local central government is saving because they are not building up, let's say, infrastructure to bring energy because of the off-grid sector, should be maybe diverted either to build local infrastructure for waste collection or just funding this first mile collection. Because the biggest challenge in collection of and recycling of grid solar products will really be the first mile collection, especially for products like solar lanterns. And you imagine how many solar lanterns you have out there, how much it will cost to bring those solar lantern bags. If you just allocate $2 per lantern, it's a huge amount of money.
Yeah. You mentioned that there are 4 basic components to e-waste costs. You have access to waste, collection, transport, and treatment. Just so we're on the same page here when having further discussions beyond this webinar, can you clarify a little bit about what access to waste is, what is collection, where is that difference? Yeah.
With access to waste, and this is a kind of a structure that is now known since, let's say, more than 20 probably years, also from some work that and cost benchmarking that has been done in Euro. With access to waste, we assume we include the financial compensation that users want to potentially receive when getting rid of certain products. When we make this calculation, we were assuming that under pay-as-you-go model, given that the lanterns and the solar home system are still owned by the company, access to waste was zero, but we know that might not be the case. So it's basically how much money consumer want, can be 50, 100, let's say, euro or dollars per ton. So meaning, let's say, couple of dollars or even more for some products. And this is mainly linked to the potential value that even a broken product has on the market as a source of spare parts. And then you have the collection cost, which are all the costs related to running a small collection center. So you have maybe a cost for renting a container, someone stuff. All the logistics has been, let's say, now here included in the transportation cost. Of course, here the first mile logistics we included in this bar, the collection cost, right? Yeah. You have the transport, which is the cost or the share of the cost of moving full load, so full trucks of waste from the collection point to the recycling plant, and so far you have only cost, so it's a liability really. And then you have the treatment where depending on the product type, you might have a positive treatment cost or a negative treatment cost, and this is the only part of the entire chain where you might have mitigation of the cost with some source of revenue. For some products, this revenue might mitigate a lot of the other costs. For instance, in the case of lead acid battery, the revenue from the treatment can offset all the other costs. For large appliances like washing machine and so on, it might also be the case. But for the great majority of other electronic products, the money generated at the treatment is not enough to cover the other expenses, especially if access to waste has to be paid.
So in the case of off-grid, your fractions that can offset those costs are really lead batteries, copper cables. And
yes. Yeah, I would say that lead and copper are the most, let's say, targeted material. You might also have aluminium, but usually you don't have that much aluminium in products, while copper, you have a lot of copper because you have all the coppers in the cables. In some products, you have a lot of copper inside, like radiators and so on. So copper is always the most wanted after lead, and then you might have aluminium and lead, and iron. Aluminium and iron, they have the fairly similar, same order of magnitude value in terms of scrap. Aluminium maybe is 2 or 3 times higher, but you have much less compared to iron. So probably you are more interested in iron than aluminium simply because you have more iron in the electronic than aluminium.
Yeah. With regards to access to waste, specifically about off-grid solar, a lot of discussion is going on right now about how can we access this waste and increase our collection. What do you think about companies paying for waste or offering any sort of financial incentive to retrieve that waste?
I mean, here as I said earlier, there is a consumer in Africa. They don't like to get rid of stuff for free because they always think there is a residual value. If someone wants this stuff, means that he can pay me something, and this is not always the case because sometimes you want the stuff, the waste, because you want to do proper treatment. The fact that I'm collecting food waste does not mean that I need to pay you for the food waste. Okay, yeah, maybe I can say I do compost and then I sell the compost, but all in all, waste management should be regarded as a service the consumer are getting. In countries like Ethiopia, people are paying for waste management on the basis of their water bill or electricity bill. Now, the point with e-waste is that the moment you start paying is the moment that people want to be paid. So I'm always against the financial incentive as such, especially because the financial incentive has nothing to do with the value of the material of e-waste. A couple of weeks ago, I was trading in my very old laptop, was an Apple product. I got 132 euro from the official Apple take-back system. $132 is not because my laptop had that value in terms of material. All this scrapping program, they are coming from something else. Maybe some spare parts can be used and then they have some value. But I'm always against using cash, because the moment you start using cash is the moment you really introduce in the mindset of the consumer even more the fact that they want to get rid of this for free. And then we'll simply increase the bar. And the moment you really need, because maybe you have a target on collection to collect 50% of the product, and you need to go out there and buy your product at very high price, is the moment the system is really not sustainable financially.
Yeah, once you start paying for it, you can't backtrack. Now, we've been talking for quite a while now. I want to go back to our audience briefly to ask them a quick poll question before I finish the interview with you, Federico. I've got a couple more questions for you, but if the audience that is still awake, we're gonna open up a poll now. It should launch on your screen. Does the cost data that we were just looking at match with what you've seen in the market? So we're just going to give a couple seconds here, and if we I don't see the slide in front of me, but perhaps Drew, you can chime in and remind us what those numbers are while the audience is answering this poll.
Thanks, Athena. It's the slide with the table, right? And we're referring to the treatment costs specifically.
The price per unit, I think. Yeah.
Okay, the price per unit from the table. So the solar lanterns is minus €1.50 per unit. Solar lantern charger minus $1.80 per unit. Small solar home system positive 1.1. Large solar home system positive 1.6.
Great, thank you, Drew.
Good, and we're collecting responses. Can you see the poll results as well, Athena?
I can. Yeah. We have about 50% at the moment that have voted. So I'll close if you can get your last votes in now, I will close it, and let's have a look at what it says.
Okay, I will close.
Can we see okay, share results, here we go. So I think overwhelming majority, you don't know.
I don't know.
It's true, because as Federico, as we discussed earlier, the products differ so much, and you're paying per weight. I know a lot of the audience members here have disposed of components rather than units. So yeah,
it will be interesting for me to know from someone maybe later that said that widely different. Why is it? Because you do all your products together? If because you do your products specifically? I would be happy, even bilaterally, if they don't want to disclose this information in public, to have this kind of conversation and then try to explain these numbers. So yeah, but it's interesting.
Yeah. If anyone who voted no would like to chime in now, just raise your hand and we can unmute you, but don't worry, the results are anonymous. Going back, that's quite interesting to see, and I hope whoever did vote yes and no can reach out to Federico and maybe we get these numbers updated. The last questions I have, Federico, have to do with forecasting waste and therefore forecasting costs, because that's really important in terms of business planning. I think there's a slide here, Drew, if you could help us out. Yep. Federico, can you talk to us a little bit about waste forecasting? I know you've created some models on this. Can you tell us how companies should do it and why a continuous failure model is important rather than a discrete failure?
Yeah, I mean, I was leading a couple of years ago the work the European Commission did to estimate the waste generated, because there was a legal requirement in Europe. So we come up with the model. A model is called sales lifespan. And of course, there are different ways you can use models to estimate the waste, but the one we used is just something that industry used for a while. Is simply saying I have a certain number of products. The average life is 5 years. Okay, if I sold 10 products 5 years ago, I can expect to have 10 products as waste now. Yeah. This sophistication is simply saying that, well, I don't have an average life of 5 years. I have some products that are lasting 2 years, some other 3, some other 7, and there is a kind of distribution of probability in terms of when the products will come back. And that's the lifespan model, and the lifespan is they say model with a weighable function. Now, the weighable function will always tell you when the product on average are coming back. We have the median and the average lifespan. The average lifespan is basically what we call average life. The median is when you have 50% of your sales that are coming back. Now, estimation of waste being generated can be done, let's say, simply saying, okay, how much products I sold in the past using a certain this kind of probabilistic distribution. What is important is that the weight word use weight, kilo or tons as metric and not units. So I think first of all, it's important that companies start having an idea of how much weight they place on the market. And then, of course, we might have also a kind of discussion here because especially for solar home system, you might have that you place on the market a solar home system, which is maybe out there for 5, 6, 7 years. But then during these 6, 7 years, you replace the battery twice. So you might have that the batteries as a waste, as component generated, as waste component generated, it's twice the amount of solar home system you have out there. So recently we make some tailoring of this model to also enable to take the model this into account. But all in all, if you as a company say, okay, how much product I sold in the past, the average life of my products, you can easily get it through your market intelligence, or you do some survey with consumer, and then you get this model, and you can have a rough idea. I think it's important to have order of magnitude, not precise number. So if you sell that you sold 1 million product or 10 products, might have a different expectation on the waste. Whether this waste is coming in 2 years or in 5 years is less relevant. It's much more important, especially if you want to plan your financial liability. Just have an understanding how much products you place on the market.
So this is more of a kind of back of the napkin type calculation to allow for financial planning, rather than a specific, more scientific forecast of
I mean, the model is, let's say, scientific in the sense that it's one of the mostly used in literature. Of course, you can complicate the model a lot. If you look, there are plenty of alternatives. The problem is that you can develop a model, then you need to feed the model with data. When we did this for European Commission, all this methodology has been officially adopted. So it's part, for instance, of the European Union legal background. Is that we wanted to develop a model which was having only very few variables. In this case, you have 2 variables: the lifespan and the sales. Another model which was, let's say, easier to debug and interpret the results. And here it's simply saying that you have a probabilistic distribution of the how much when the waste is coming back. You have the sales, and the sales are let's say, are spread over the timeline according to this distribution. And you can start, and it's usually per type of product. And it's if you want to plot this lifetime distribution, you won't say, I don't know how this could look like for my products. You just need to do survey, interview with people, ask how old was the product when they discarded. You just plot the dots on piece of paper, and then you just interpolate the dots with the best line you can draw, and then you get your parameters.
Yeah, we have a question here, because it's also noted on the slide that component lifespans differ greatly from product lifespan. So we have a question here from Sunai asking, why is the mean lifespan of a solar panel of solar panels in solar home systems less than 5 years, when on-grid solar panels have a warranty for 25 years?
I mean, I don't know if when Drew took this from which kind of example took it, just to give you an idea. Not necessarily this is reflecting the products. I think when it comes to the solar home system, it's quite an interesting example, because you have the panel, you have the battery, you have the electronics and the connected devices, and those four components and stuff have different lifetime. Technically speaking, sometimes the lifetime of a panel can last longer, but maybe if you collect after the 5 or 6 years at the end of a pay-as-you-go a product, you collect still the electronic, the battery, and the panel together. Definitely, battery has a lower lifetime, because at least speaking with almost a lot of companies in this sector, they all said that the battery is replaced at least once, if not more, during the life cycle of even during the pay-as-you-go period. So the number of batteries generated as waste are much more compared to, for instance, of the number of PV panels generated as waste from a solar home system.
Another question I have on forecasting waste is, how can companies incorporate decreasing failure rates into their modeling, and as well when they forecast waste, it's assuming that they have access to all of this waste. So how can they also model the access to waste challenge?
Yeah, I think first of all, we are talking about, this kind of curve, Weibull curve, are pretty well known by reliability engineers. That's how you model reliability of components historically. In all, especially in electronic products. That's the background behind the Weibull curve. Without going to the statistics of this, here we are more into the social aspects, because products are discarded by consumer, not necessarily because they're broken. Sometimes it's just a replacement. Sometimes you have different dynamics. So here I really think the best way is to start with some consumer survey to get a feeling when your products are coming back, and then you can make some. As I said, the best is to do back of the envelope calculation, because your model can be as complex as it can be, but will never interpret what's really going on the ground with all these loops, internal loops, components, and so on. Right now, for instance, we are doing updating a consumer study on the ground in Romania, just trying to understand when products are coming back, if products are really coming back. And it's all about understanding dynamics of consumer disposing or deciding to replace the product. That's really the key element.
I think we've been speaking for quite a while, and we have some other panelists waiting for today's session. So my last and final question to you, Federico, is: can you tell us something positive about e-waste?
I mean, I'm really positive. I'm really happy to see off-grid solar sector so engaged in trying to proactively collect and recycle products. So that's something I really like, and that's why I like working so much with this sector. There are good opportunity to develop a relationship with consumer using the take back of a product as a leverage to keep the customer closer to you. So I think there's good opportunity, and I think you just need to be creative. And this sector, this industry, proved to be creative over the last couple of years. Over the last 10 years, you are, let's say, selling products, services in markets that were previously untouched. So I think you already proved to be creative in sales and shaping, inventing products. If you use the same creativity on trying to close the loop, I think something that will work will definitely be developed.
That's a great note. And we do have one audience question now. I'd like to open the floor officially for audience questions. So if you do have any questions out there, please start typing them in. We have one from Edwin that asks, how would you see the costings on market share, considering that the informal sector, given the fact that informal sector consists of a big majority of solar products on the market, and Lighting Global / Gogla products are only about 30%. So how does that affect the market share calculations?
I mean, if you are not handling those products, because informal collect and recycle are handling, you will not, let's say, be responsible for financing of those products. For me, the key point, the key issue of informal sector is the fact that informal treatment should be stopped in countries, because it's also jeopardizing any effort of formal recyclers to do good things to improve their operations. And secondly, the key element is that we have a lot of informal repair going on, some also formal repair, and nothing against that, the formal repair going on. So some of the broken products can go through for repair first, but we need to make sure that we create a safety net of collection and take back also from the repair segment. I think the best way for industry to take control over the cost is to be proactive, even in terms of then asking government certain guarantees. If you do your job, I think you should not be penalized, and that's why you should pretend enforcement to happen. It's not easy. It's not something that we can solve in a couple of weeks or in a month. Yeah. But we need to start setting at least key milestones.
Great. Awesome. Thank you very much, Federico. I'm going to end it there, and I will invite Corey and Andrew to join us. Federico, thank you very much. Corey and Andrew, if you may turn on your webcam / audio. I think Andrew is joining us on audio only today.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, great. Fantastic. Welcome both to Corey and Andrew. We've spoken to Federico a lot about kind of the knowledge base behind the financials of off-grid e-waste and the theory there and some research he's done. And now we'd like to hear from you two about your experience from the industry perspective and how you see that. So just to kick off, if you could introduce yourselves a little bit and what you do with regards to e-waste. Let's start with Andrew.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Lobis. I work at Phoenix International, which is a solar home system company, and I'm currently working as the Africa Operations Manager. So I work with our operations managers across our countries of operations and just help them with logistics, supply chain, and generally upgrading their activities.
And that includes specifically e-waste logistics as well.
Indeed.
Great. Corey.
Hey, this is Corey Barnes-Covenant. So I am a supply chain manager for Zola. And so I handle kind of all the logistics problems that happen across all of our markets across the continent. So including e-waste, also including last mile distribution, and including collection of product from customers who no longer need it anymore. So scope really entails, as well as refurbishment and repair. So kind of all through the supply chain as well as the refurb cycle.
Fantastic. So I'm going to put you both on the spot here and ask, how did you vote in the polls? Do those numbers resonate with the e-waste costs you have seen within your company? Andrew, you can. Or Corey, I think we're having some connection issues. Corey, go ahead.
Sure. I would say it resonated pretty well with what we've seen. Generally, we take it out to bid. We have a bit of a longer lifespan product, so we haven't had as broad a base of vendor management to actually get a stable price. But the prices we've seen when we have taken it out to bid have been pretty close to what Federico landed on. So,
Andrew,
I was definitely in the yes column.
Yeah, I think we're kind of the same. The thing is, the price we pay for disposal of the actual resources, obviously baked into that is often the transport and other logistics costs on the side of the recycler. But as like a kind of benchmark for cost, I think that's pretty accurate from the markets we've seen so far.
Just to clarify, so those prices that we saw earlier are resonate with you in terms of the external and internal costs of handling e-waste, or those prices match your external costs only?
So far, I would say they're closer to match to external.
Okay, so you also have additional internal costs as well?
Yes, we do.
How would you categorize those internal costs? Where's that line?
They're actually often included in they're kind of blurred into our outbound logistics costs. So for instance, when we're sending out a delivery of units or something like that to the field, we'll often on the way back be bringing items for repair and perhaps some portion of those eventually for recycling. So it can be a little bit hard for us to splice that out. And also because the truck is going out that way already, the marginal cost per unit for return is actually quite low. So although we have internal costs for transportation and some processing, they aren't terribly high, but I think as Federico's numbers capture relatively well the external cost of disposing of these components as a unit, as a whole unit.
Fantastic. Corey, I see you nodding a little bit there. Can you tell us, is that the same with Zola?
No, certainly the same. I mean, we're capturing this, when we go out to do service, when we send out new units, whenever we can take back an item, we take it back and send it back through our general reverse stream. So it's kind of all blended together, but I would say looking at how the breakdown of access, collection, transport, and treatment, I think that both Andrew and I are, more on the access and collection side of things than the transportation treatment. So I would say that the internal for us is the access and collection. External would be transportation treatment.
Yep, fantastic. Now, before I move on to my next question, I want to wake up the audience again. If you're there, we're going to share another poll question, which I'm just going to launch on your screen now. What factor do you think has the biggest potential to reduce end-of-life management costs in the next 5 years? Do you think it's improved take-back, more awareness among market players, government regulation, compliance schemes, or greater competition amongst established recyclers? So please vote now, and then I'm going to go back to our panelists and get their thoughts on the matter. Which factor do you think has the biggest potential to reduce end-of-life management costs in the next 5 years, the short term? So we've got some voting going on here, about 67%. Fantastic. Okay, I'm just going to close the poll now. One more vote. Anyone? Let's see these results. So a bit of a mixed board here. The greatest factor to reduce end-of-life management costs amongst our audience, you guys consider government regulation. Corey, what do you think on this? What did you vote?
I would probably go for all of the above as my first vote.
Yeah.
Barring that, probably industry-led compliance. And I think kind of by, as Federico was saying, since volume is such a large portion of this, I might blend that in with improved take back, but just getting everybody in the industry on board to increase those volumes, which is going to provide much better prices all around for the whole industry. So some blend of improved take back and industry-like compliance.
Yeah, so really what I'm hearing from you is like internal efforts of the industry is the first step there towards cost reduction.
Sure.
Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I actually think that competition between service providers will actually be quite impactful in the medium term. And I think that especially if these service providers begin to compete not just on pure cost, but also on something like collection or access. So if you had a service provider that had maybe more points of collection around a country or regional hubs, that could really cut down the costs that we incur in some of these disposals in some cases. And it may actually just lead to a competition also in the offering of services. So they may start to compete with each other, not just on cost, but like how can they maybe aid in pre-processing, have some liaisons earlier on to help guide companies in how they are going to dispose of these things, or how they can prepare things for efficient, inexpensive, and safe disposal. So I actually think from the markets we're looking at, my personal opinion is that competition between service providers in the recycling industry is actually going to be the bigger, if I had to pick one, the biggest needle mover of those in the 5-year span.
It's interesting. We have a difference of opinion here. One is a greater focus on internal to the off-grid sector, and the other one is a greater focus on external players of the sector. But I think we can all agree that an all of the above answer would move forward. So what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about how is Phoenix and Zola incorporating these costs? How are you sustaining them within the business? And how are you planning on doing that going forward? Is anything changing? Or so I'd like to start with Corey. The costs that have been incurred by Zola so far with e-waste management, how have you incorporated them in the business, and how are you guys planning on doing that going forward?
Yeah, so incorporating them in the business is, we incorporate end of life into our business model in general, just as a cost that we expect to incur. So I think going forward, it's really a matter of kind of figuring out what the variables are to Federico's last slide of kind of what is the average life we're seeing, what are the costs we're seeing incurred, how is the lifespan changing based on the use of the product and based on the product line mix. So I think it's just a matter of tweaking each of those variables to figure out if the cost that we already have on the books and expected is actually coming true.
Okay, and that's internal kind of costing or would you want external data to support that?
Sorry, could you better define external data?
External, like an industry market review or cost benchmarking across regions.
Oh, most certainly. I mean, cost benchmarking would be fantastic. I mean, that would be kind of gold standard for what we would expect to put through on a product. Barring that, we will do internal benchmarking about what it's going to be, but that's never going to quite hit the mark.
Okay, great. Andrew, what about you? What about Phoenix?
I think we're very similar to Zola in that we build this into our models. This is something that we factor in when we're selling a unit, is the eventual cost of its safe disposal. So that's just something we've continued to factor in, and obviously we want to continue to bring these costs down while maintaining a high standard and of safety and environmental responsibility, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at the clock and we're running towards the end of the webinar. So I will open the floor to questions from attendees. If you have them, please put them in the question box or in the chat box, and we can ask Andrew and Corey. While we're waiting for questions to come through from our audience, I have my favorite question for both of you. Can you tell me something positive about e-waste? Corey, let's start with you.
Sure. So, I mean, I think my goal, kind of personally, as an environmentalist, is to use whatever resources we have as effectively as we can. I think recycling is, the height of that, is finding the best, most effective use for the materials that we have, and not taking any more than we need to from the environment. So I think that is just the height of what we should be looking at.
Andrew?
I can't really disagree with Corey because I think that's very well put, but I would say in addition, one of the things I think is important to view e-waste as is almost like an exercise. So doing reverse logistics, bringing items back from the field, categorizing them, sorting them, making them ready for disposal, all of these are kind of exercises you can do as a company to kind of build your supply chain muscle, so to speak. And I think that those the learnings you get from that and the development and processes you get from that can have upsides for the rest of your business. So I think you become a stronger company operationally when you actually take that extra step and engage meaningfully with your customers and service centers and all that stuff to bring used material back to a central point and disposing of it properly.
Those are both fantastic answers. I really like them, a lot of similarities there. We have a question from the audience about how you have used internal processes, efficiencies in your processes, repair, refurbishment to reduce the cost of e-waste. Corey, do you have anything? I know you're doing a lot of repair and refurbishment. Can you tell us how you've used that to reduce e-waste costs?
Sure. So, so in the method of reduce, reuse, recycle, we definitely try to reuse as much as possible. And so from our beginnings, we've brought back product from either warranty claims or removals or all sources, refurb that product with internal technicians. And then to Andrew's point, it serves the business. So we can put that back out, as a refurbished product, hit a new customer base. And so that's both keeping it out of the waste stream, but also serving the bottom line of the company.
Andrew, do you also rely a lot on refurbishment?
Yeah, very much. The majority of products we receive from the field, we're actually able to refurbish to a point where it can either be used as a swap for another customer or any other usage. So by having a repair team internal, just as Zola does, I'm sure, we're able to keep a lot of these materials that may be fixable or maybe repairable out of the entire e-waste cycle until a later date. So we try to get a little bit more mileage on them. And as I'm sure everyone here knows, a very small technical fault can doom a product for a customer using it, and it can be very simple for a technician to fix that. So the more we can do that, the better it is for our business and the better it is environmentally.
And yeah, that's a really important point. We have another question here about how have you chosen so far your e-waste service providers? What decision metrics have you used? And is cost the most important? Let's start with Andrew this time.
So for us, we try to analyze whether or not an e-waste provider is going to be disposing these items responsibly, if they have the ability to do this. Like we'll look at certifications they have, recommendations from other companies, track record, certain types of equipment that they may or may not possess. I'm not a real expert in that, but I've been guided by a few people, including Athena, on recommendations. But I would say that once we've determined a supplier to reach a certain minimum threshold, and we know that they're going to be generally disposing of these items in an economically friendly and environmentally friendly fashion, once it's environmentally friendly, we look more at the costs. And one of the important costs for us, I'm speaking as someone working out of Uganda, is logistics. So a company's ability to do logistics. We have to ship a lot of stuff across borders because there aren't many established suppliers in Uganda. So a combination of their actual cost for disposal and their kind of institutional capacity to perform these complex border maneuvers, import-export, at speed and at scale.
So if we look at the four factors of the cost structure, it's the transport there that you say is particularly important in Uganda.
Yep, it's very important, as well as you could also lump duties under there too, because if the company does not have a very good understanding of how they're to structure the actual export and the paperwork, there can be delays at the border that can just lead to more and more costs.
Corey, how about you? How do you choose an e-waste service provider?
I don't know that I can add on a lot to that. I would say the environmental aspect and making sure it's done well is a non-starter. I mean, so it has to be on the table, and then past that, it gets into cost and who's doing it, who can do it properly, and then who can do it at the best cost.
What kind of information do you use to assess both of those?
That's a good question that I'm not qualified to answer. So usually I contact to our internal engineering and field teams.
Great, thank you. We have another question here. We looked at what are the factors that can reduce costs going forward for the next couple of years. In your experience, Corey and Andrew, have you seen costs come down already? Are they going up? Do you think the costs will go down? Corey, let's start with you.
I do. I mean, I think that on an economic basis, we have seen costs come down marginally, not terribly. But I think on an economic basis, as the industry grows and as we see more volume, as we see steadier volume, I think that prices are going to come down. It's just a matter of kind of the market, the in-between there of how it actually happens. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work.
Andrew?
The only thing I would add to that is I wonder if increased competition might lead to specialization of some companies. So maybe one company kind of becomes the plastic disposal, another one, the one for wires. And I wonder if once we start to see specialization inside the recycling industry, we may then see a corresponding dip in the cost as these companies get better and better and better and faster at disposing of specific components.
That's great.
So I'll actually tack onto that. I think one of the things that we had talked about was joint business planning and having recyclers more integrated into the operational process. And I think to the extent that we can do that, in terms of whether we can start to do some of the things that they are doing and reduce their costs, or if they can do some of the things at our sites to be more cost effective, I think that as we integrate more, we can start to drive costs down further.
Have you, has Zola yet done anything with regards to that in terms of that shared kind of load and distributing activities?
Not directly with recyclers, but we have certainly in other areas of the business.
Yeah. Andrew, have you worked with any of your e-waste providers to kind of reduce costs through joint business planning?
To be honest, we've kind of been skipping between e-waste providers because some of them have not maybe been around for a long time, or they go in and out of business. So we're still casting about for a partner with whom we can build that kind of long-term relationship that would justify and incentivize this planning together.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it earlier in our conversation that it's still early days for both of you in terms of your relationship with e-waste providers. So once that relationship starts to mature, there's a lot more opportunity to work together to reduce those costs. I think we have one more question. I just check if it's been asked and answered. No, I think we've discussed that already. It was a question about access to waste. Are you doing anything with regards to incentivizing your customers to give back their product? What efforts are you doing to increase collection rates? Corey, do you have any comments on that?
Sure. So, I mean, we are doing a couple things. So, I mean, obviously we take back for warranties and we take back for removals. And then we are starting to lead more of an effort into end-of-life product and upselling opportunities. So we see end-of-life as not just taking back product, but a chance for us to make another sale. Obviously, they've been satisfied, they've paid their contract, they've been a good customer, so we might as well use that as an opportunity. So we've tied in our data and credit teams to our end-of-life process to say, these are approaching end-of-life, why don't we start to take these back and also use that as an opportunity. So it's something we've started to do, and we've got a project in the line to enhance that.
Fantastic. Andrew, what about Phoenix?
I think we're very similar to Zola in what we're doing. The only thing I would really want to stress, and this is a bit obvious, but I think it's worth stressing, is warranty is very important. Giving a customer an incentive for him or her to bring their components, potentially faulty components, to you is extremely important. So I would say, I know that every company has to figure out how the warranty situation will work, how it will work financially, but I would really recommend individuals thinking about warranty as a main kind of draw for customers to bring these potentially faulty, potentially end-of-life components to you. And of course, as Corey mentioned, it's a way to extend your relationship with the customer in a meaningful way. So warranty for us is very, very important.
I think it's a strong message on which to end. Do you have any final thoughts, Corey, on the topic?
No. I mean, I think going forward, I think yeah, reduction in waste is first order for us, and then dealing with proper waste providers is certainly second, reducing that cost. So those are our focuses. Exactly.
Yep. Andrew, last thoughts?
No, I would just say a lot of things that are good environmentally also make good business sense. So as long as we can continue to have that lovely synergy between things that are good for the planet and things that are good for the business, I think it's worth pursuing that.
Those are fantastic messages on which to bring this discussion to a close. Corey, Andrew, thank you very much for your time and for joining us here. I'm sorry we couldn't go into more depth. And I will now hand over the reins back to Drew, who has some exciting information to give you on the eWaste Festival coming up.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Athena. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Andrew. That was a really interesting discussion. And you may have seen, I did post one more question in the chat, which I think we can park for now, but pick up at the eWaste Festival. And the question is, have Zola or Phoenix considered joint business planning to increase the volumes of waste, secure better prices, and build the capacity of a recycler? And is there, scope for kind of increased cooperation in the sector, at a country level or a regional level to work around that? And would there be a role for GOGLA or a National Renewable Energy Association to facilitate that? So yeah, I'm not going to ask for answers now, but yeah, I think an interesting one to think about in the next 2 weeks and pick up again at the eWaste Festival, which is happening July 16 to 18 in Nairobi. We'll be at the Nairobi Garage in Kilimani. And the aim is to bring together the GOGLA eWaste Working Group, along with Korea members and some of the service providers to discuss, create new ideas, partnerships, and projects. It's a 3-day festival. So the first one is going to be very much kind of hands-on workshop. We'll have some group discussions, breakouts, and discussions focusing on the morning. We'll look at access to waste and the take back from the consumers, thinking about the different channels and mechanisms that exist there. Then in the afternoon, we'll look at the storage, handling, and transport, and some of the practical elements there for companies to think about. Day 2 is the morning we're going to look at the Kenya e-waste policy and the industry response to that, and discuss some of the conditions that we would like to see that's going to help support the sector to to improve the end-of-life management and reduce costs. Then in the afternoon, we'll be looking at the Global Leap Solar E-Waste Challenge, and the plan is to announce the winners at this event. There's going to be 10 winners, I expect, can be announced, and then we'll have some analysis of the results and look at the next step for the winners and for that program. And we will have a social in the evening on Wednesday. We're still figuring out the where and how. If anybody has any fantastic ideas of a good venue around Kilimani for the group to have some food and drinks, then drop us a line and let us know. And day 3, we're going to visit the WE Centre. We're going to meet up in the city and get a bus out together, have a tour of the facility, some Q&A with their management, group discussion before heading back and finishing mid-afternoon. So there is, we've got a capacity of 50 spaces for the festival, and I think the registrations have hit upwards of 40. So it's now fairly tight. If you haven't registered yet, please do so. Does anybody have any questions about the e-waste festival that they would like to ask now? If not, you can drop an email to me or Juliana. I'd also like to flag the other bit of news that the briefing note 2, looking at design for reduction of waste, has now been published, and you can download it on the e-waste hub on the Gogla site. Reduction of waste came up a number of times today. I know noted Corey just said, the first step in reducing the costs of waste in the sector is reducing waste in the first place. So thinking of the reduce, reuse, repair cycles, and this briefing note explores some of the product design and business model design strategies which are prevalent in the sector, and links to a number of resources that you can look at to take that further. If anybody has any feedback on this briefing note as we think about producing briefing notes 3, 4, 5, and 6, please do let me know. I'd like to take the opportunity as well to say thank you to Swedfund for funding this toolkit, which is allowing us to produce these briefing notes and run the 7 seminars. Suna is online, and pleased to see that he's following this. And finally, as now has become a terrible tradition in the e-waste toolkit seminars, we have a joke, and I'm delighted to share this with you. Why did the off-grid solar company have a hard time with their e-waste cost calculations? Because of the problematic fractions. I don't know if Federico's still on the line and laughing.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
I was laughing. But now I'm curious about the previous 2 jokes of the other 2 webinars.
Okay.
You have to send me.
Yeah, so they're you can find the recordings on the Google e-waste hub, and flick through. I think it's best delivered in person rather than repeating. Cool. We'll end up there. Thank you very much, Federico, Corey, and Andrew, and of course, thank you very much to Athena for holding our hand through this and moderating another excellent webinar. With that,
see you soon in Nairobi.
Yeah, and look forward to seeing everybody soon in Nairobi. See you there. Thanks now.